On behalf of the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, I call this meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Dr. Bofi. Here. Mr. Castile.
Here.
Dr. Davis. Here. Ms. Ellis. Here. Mr. Garvey.
Here.
Ms. Holloway. Here. Mr. Mellering.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones. Is here. Mr. Rock.
Here.
Ms. Bochet. Here. And Mr. Johnson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item, please.
The consent agenda is ready for your approval, adding items 3.1 and 5.1 through 5.5.
May I get a motion? Ms. Bochet, second. Dr. Davis. Thank you. Next item. Oh, any opposed? Next item.
Mr. Chair, in an effort to be mindful of the distances traveled by our student representatives, we'd like to get a motion to take item 7.1 out of order and heard now, please.
Okay. Motion by Ms. Ellis, second by Dr. Davis.
This item is on page 160, item 7.1, consideration of recognition of Mr. Zach Johnson, 2021-2022 student representative for the Bessie Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, and the introduction of Ms. Rylan Rocca, 2022-2023 student representative. The recommendation is to receive.
May I get a motion? Ms. Ellis, second by Mr. Garvey. Just briefly, Mr. Johnson, thank you for your time. I know you were talking to us earlier. You're a senior at this time and you plan on Louisiana Tech. You said you're just studying marketing. Business marketing. So you know that was my major in college. I have a special place for it. So good luck on that. Also, congratulations on being a finalist for Student of the Year. That's a big honor. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure some other members of the board would like to extend their congratulations as well. So I'll open it up. Ms. Ellis.
I'll go. 318 strong right here. We meant to make t-shirts and we just realized it's been a year and we never made our shirts. But congratulations to you, Zach. You've just been a real light every meeting. I think we can all agree that we've enjoyed having you. Your insight has been one that we've appreciated from a student perspective. And we're really proud of you. We're excited to see you at the Student of the Year event coming up soon. So that's exciting. And then also, you know, all of the amazing things you've done back home, because I keep up with them on Facebook, because I'm from that area, and so all the sports and awards and special things you do, it's pretty amazing to see you just shine this year. So we're super proud of you, and we're glad that I'm glad everyone here got to meet you, because I already knew about you, but I hadn't met you because I worked with your dad. But I'm so glad that we got to spend this year with you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ms. Bochet.
Yeah, and I'd also like to offer my congratulations, Zach, and I was really super impressed. Every time you spoke, you were so eloquent in your speech, and you represented the students of our state extremely well. And I was very impressed that you had your newsletter that you sent out after each of these meetings. So from your perspective, you could tell everyone what we were doing here as Bessie members and the input that you had. So you're on a great track. I know Louisiana Tech is very fortunate to have you come to their institution this year. We would like you to come back periodically and give us some updates, but then we'll go through Ms. Ellis and we'll carpool. And so we're excited for you, and it's always great to see such an accomplished young man just proceed on his journey. So please keep us in touch with what you're doing and let us know, because we're very, very interested in it. I think you've made a tremendous impact on each and every one of us.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Morris.
Yes, Zach, I'd just like to echo the comments from my colleagues. Just really appreciate the example you set for other students. Your comments are very thoughtful and meaningful. and you're our future. So we're looking at you, we're following you, we appreciate you. Now, with regard to Mr. Bellerman's comments, I just want to remind you that Louisiana Tech is an excellent engineering school, and you should keep that in mind as well.
I'll think about it. I will attest to that. My wife has a engineering degree from Tech, so.
You could also be an educator, Zach.
Abby, I don't know if you'd like to follow his footsteps, but become attorney, we have enough attorneys on this board right
Anybody else have any comments from the board before Mrs. Takabofi?
So I had the privilege to serve as a student council sponsor when I was teaching middle school, and I think this is an incredible opportunity, something I'm always proud to get to meet the students. So Zach, thank you for approaching this year and this work with so much enthusiasm and commitment to our state. And like my fellow board members, I look forward to seeing what you do in your future, and I do recommend education. It's an incredible profession.
Thank you so much. It's my turn.
There you go.
Well, now it's my turn to thank all of you so much, every single one of you. Miss Ellis from my district has done an excellent job of taking me under her wing this year. Dr. Brumley, you've been the best at encouraging. Mr. Morris, leading my committee all year, even though we just switched off. But it's impossible to thank each and every one of you. It's been an incredible experience, nothing but auspicious. I've learned how this works, but not only learned, I've engaged with it. I've had the opportunity to speak. I've walked these halls of this building. I've learned to connect each of you on a level. I believe at some point throughout the year I spoke with each one of you individually, and that's incredible. And I'm the only student in Louisiana who got to do that this year, and that's crazy for me to think about. But I'll forever hold it dear to me, and I'll forever be thankful for it. And you know, going back to December of 2020, when I applied for this, I remember thinking, it's not going to be me. There's no way. And so I sat at the computer and I thought for a long time, you know, there's a very extensive process to apply for this. And I thought of all the students who came before me. Last year, Jack Walker, who's a phenomenal young student leader. Before him, Cameron Doyle, many of you may know, I don't know if many of you remember, but she actually on this day is running for Vice President of Academic Affairs for SGA at the University of Alabama today. So she's, yeah, we're going to wish her luck. But just looking back on all of you before me, it's an incredible history of students who came to speak here. And I sincerely hope that I have contributed in some way this year, and I hope that you feel I've been a good, successful leader as well. But I also want to take a moment to thank the people who brought me here. LASC, Mr. Phil, would you please raise your hand? LASC, it represents the Louisiana Association of Student Councils. And it's come to my attention that many of you are unaware of no one person's fault of how I'm selected, how the student is selected each year. So the Louisiana Association of Student Councils is a father organization of student councils from all over the state of Louisiana. So when you think of a student council, that's the best students that are in the school, right? They're selected by their fellow peers who represent them on a high level. But if you take the best students from every school in the state and bring them all together, that's only conducive to success. And I've seen some of the best leadership out of anywhere in the nation. I'll put it up against in the last year, and it's forever I'll hold dear to me. They're like a second family to me. And so each year, LASC holds a state convention. And this year, or the year before, our convention was canceled due to COVID. And so we had to do all the interviews online. To be selected as the best representative at that convention, you have to go through an extensive essay process, an interview process, and there's a strict committee, which I had the privilege of sitting on, to help select Mr. Alan Rocco, our new representative, who I'll introduce to you in a little bit. But I remember thinking, this is a lot of work. I don't know if I can do this or not, but I said, I'll just give it a shot. I'll try. And here I sit today, and it has been amazing, and I'm forever grateful that I went for it. And I've learned so much through this about how government works, on how to speak on a board such as this. And I hope that Ronna gets as much time. You can come on to the front. She's going to do a little introduction. But, you know, it's just something that I'll hold dear to me forever. And I truly appreciate it. Again, thank you all so much. And I hope you feel that I've contributed. Today is not about me. Today is about the young lady sitting before you now. Miss Riley Rocca of Hackberry High School is a three-sport athlete. She plays varsity softball, basketball, and track. She's the student council president at her school. She's vice president of her class, and she's heavily involved in FBLA. So she certainly is well-versed in government and is just an incredible young lady, and she's so excited to be here. So, Riley, is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach. As you now know, my name is Riley Rocca of Hackberry High School, of Counter Parish, located in the 7th Bessie District. I would like to begin by expressing how very thankful I am for having been selected for my new position. It is an honor to be standing before you today in a position that a few short months ago I would always dreamed of having. While our schools are pushing to a new normal, the struggles of students facing an ever-changing educational landscape has brought the struggles of mental health to the forefront for both teachers and students. These struggles bring up new challenges which students and teachers are rising to face. It is my goal to not only inform Louisiana's teachers and students, but to have their struggles and challenges in the educational arena be heard. I am very grateful for this opportunity, and I hope that I will be found helpful in each of our endeavors this year. Again, thank you and have a blessed day. I'm truly excited for what this year holds.
Thank you, Ms. Rocca. We look forward to working with you next year. Ms. Holloway, I know you, Ms. Holloway, then.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I did want to say something earlier, but right in, we're fairly excited about having you join us. Zach, I would recommend you continue with your newsletter just to keep us updated. I mean, you do it so well quarterly, so thank you for everything. It's just an inspiration to us and also to our students in the state. But I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Phil. Mr. Phil is from the Thibodeau area, my area, so it's so good to see you. Do you have somebody with you? Is that Miss Beth David?
Beth David from Thibodeau High, she's
Thought so.
the assistant executive director. And I've been executive director now for 53 years.
I know.
And so I needed backup and a sidekick, and she's the best of the best.
Oh, isn't she? Beth, please stand. I thought I recognized you, but I wasn't quite sure from up here. Thank you both so much. Well, I really even forget that student council will be in good hands with that.
And
Thank you.
for allowing us the privilege of having a student on the best.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And as you know, that they're not biased. We don't have a Thibodeau student sitting here every year, right, Mr. Phil? You really are diverse in the state. Thank you.
I want to welcome you, Rylan, to Bessie. I also just, they joked about their area code, so representing the 337 area code here in Southwest Louisiana, and also just so exciting for a parish like Cameron Parish that has faced so much struggle. And you just being here today, I think exemplifies so much perseverance and resilience. And we have a lot of big districts and a lot of big schools in our state, but we also have some very small and rural districts. And so it's so exciting to see a student who's coming from such a small district stand up and represent students across the state. So welcome. We look forward to serving with you and having you push our thinking and the work that we do this coming year. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, before we go on, we have a token of appreciation for you. We're going to come down and take a picture with Mr. Morris, you're the chair of the committee. Come down and speak.
Thank you so much.
Is that this is what actually, anybody want to come down? There we go.
There you go.
think we have a motion on the floor. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Next agenda item, please.
The next item is on page 17, item 4.1, consideration of an update report regarding LDA student transfer request appeals in accordance with Act 420, revised statute 17-4035.1 of the 2021 regular legislative session. The Bessie staff recommendation is to receive the report and retain the item on the April 2022 AGII committee agenda in order to present the guidance document regarding a definition of capacity as well as any potential policy revisions.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Morris? Second, please. Mr. Garvey? Are there any comments from the board? Or is there a presentation? Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I just had a question, looking for clarification. There's been a lot of discussion about capacity issue, how it will be determined, when and where it will be posted. And my understanding is, what we would do is we would compare the actual enrollment to the capacity number. But I haven't heard any discussion about how the actual enrollment is determined, when it's determined, and where it's posted. So I was just hoping to get some clarification on that.
So I'll confuse with that. So I presented at the staff meeting, in the backup information, you have the slide that outlines that. What the law states is that the school system has to determine the capacity for each school, not just for the district, but for each school, and post it to their website and send it to the department. And so when I checked in with the department, I found out, that the school systems weren't necessarily aware of this requirement. And so I also asked to get to work with some superintendents, I asked this at the staff meeting, to come up with a guidance document for Bessie members around the issue of capacity, especially, for these reasons. So you'll have an idea of some possibilities or how capacity may have been decided upon by districts. Because we're going to be the ones considering these appeals. I'm saying you all are going to be the ones making the decision, and you're going to need to know what the capacity is for that school and that district. And also what's stated in the law is that if you all determine that capacity was not considered properly for that student, that you can just ship it back to the school system before you actually take formal action on it. And so we have to have that information in order to make those decisions. So that, I believe, answers your question. It needs to be posted to the website of the school system and reported to the department. My vision was that we would be able to check in with the department and get a listing of all the reports for the times when the appeals did come in, and we would pull those for that school system and consider that application individually.
So that speaks to the capacity issue, but I haven't heard any conversation with regard to the actual enrollment that you would use to compare to capacity, right? To see if the enrollment has actually reached capacity, so there's no room for an additional student. So that's the thing I'm trying to get closure on is what's the enrollment consideration, what specific date, where it's actually posted and when, so it's on the same date that you're preparing the capacity to.
What the in-time capacity is what you're saying? I mean, what the in-time enrollment is, I guess.
My mind is, I think, through the process, right? And what they're going to do is compare the posted capacity relative to the posted enrollment, right? If there are equal numbers, there's no room for an additional student, right? And therefore, they reach their capacity limit. So, but you have to have both of those numbers to do the comparison. So I haven't heard any conversation about the enrollment part of that. It's not clear to me what the date is that's going to be determined, where that's going to be posted. And I would think that they would both be the same date, both for capacity and enrollment.
I would think that enrollment would factor into your capacity, but what that number fluctuated at the point of posting to the date of the appeal would be something that maybe to consider. And I guess that would be something that we could, I'm open to you all suggesting things, but maybe that could be something we could verify once we do get that appeal in, to see what.
Well, I mean, if we look at the very simplest case, right? It's a one-room school building, the one room seats 100 students, very simple case, right? And then, so my capacity is 100. Okay. My enrollment is 99, so I've got room for one student. My enrollment's 100, my capacity is reached, I've got no room for any additional student to come in.
And that's why I wanted the guidance document, because what we had discussed, what I'm finding out and what I believe to be true is that it is more about the student-teacher ratios for a particular grade level as opposed to, or course, as opposed to the school building capacity.
I get that.
Okay.
That's why I gave a real simple example, but you're still speaking to capacity.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get a better understanding for how you're going to tie that to the enrollment number
Yes.
at the same, on the same day.
Yeah, just to make a little comment about it. The revised statute says that the school district will define capacity. And when it comes here, the BESI is supposed to look at, did the school system follow their definition of capacity? Not for BESI to define what capacity is. Now, capacity can mean many, many different things, and it's not just numbers. When you're determining, this whole piece of legislation deals with these applications coming in the month of March for the following year. And you've got to give people determination. So when we're staffing, like right now, school systems throughout the state are staffing for next year. So we're taking enrollment numbers right now, deciding who's going to be, which students have indicated they're remaining with us for the following year. We're taking pre-registration for maybe kindergarten and pre-K-4 programs and such, which will continue to take over the course of the year. And then what traditional public school systems have to do that maybe some other students, private schools may not, and maybe some charters or whatever, is you must reserve room for kids who transfer into your school district. So even if I had a capacity of 20 students in a class, and I had 19 come in, that doesn't mean I have room for one more. Because if some family moves into that attendance zone at any time during the year, we must take their child. We can't say, well, we don't have any room for you because we filled it with someone else. So many of us have defined capacity as, say, if we staff at 20 to 1, maybe 90% of that, or whatever, because you have to reserve spots for kids who move into your attendance zones. Then if you have potentially UIR schools or CIR schools, you may make a commitment to staff at a lower ratio for some classes and some grade levels. So if you have a high number of Title I kids or special education kids. So it's not as simple as a numbers game when you define capacity at a particular school. So a lot of that goes into this determination. And those definitions of capacity, according to the law as it exists right now, the definition is the purview of the local school system. And we just need to make sure that that school system is not denying someone within that definition of what your capacity is. So it's not as simple as 18 versus 20 or one less or one more. And then, so there's a lot of things that go into it, and I think that's why Ms. Davis was asking when she met with the Superintendent's Advisory Council, when all these different factors were brought out, asked that they would have a group who would meet together, and maybe put some guidance around that or some explanation so that everyone could understand where these definitions are coming from.
So I'm looking at slide number 27 where we talk about the LEA responsibilities, that prior to the transfer request period, the LEAs have notified students that they're in D or an F school, and then they're going to tell them all of the schools that had an A, B, or C letter grade in the district. I'm wondering if we might not cut down a lot of parent angst if part of that letter also listed the schools that currently have capacity. Because if you're a parent and you see your district has 5 A schools, and so you would, every time you go to request a transfer, you're denied by your district because they were already full, that, I mean, that would cut down on a lot of, I think, unnecessary effort on the part of parents, and then also cut down on a lot of parent angst if they knew ahead of time when they got that letter which schools had capacity for their child or not. Does that seem reasonable, or is there
I think
a reason
the
why that's?
problem probably would come in is in grade levels again. It might be the schools, but do you really want to go to the level of outlining the school, these grade levels? You know,
I mean, I see that
it
that
should
would
be
be
an individual
complicated.
consideration. I think the purpose of the bill was to consider them on an individual basis, rather than discourage folks from applying because these parameters already are, you know, set around not applying.
I guess if I'm thinking about this as a school board member, and I'm gonna get a lot of parent complaints from my district about the fact that my child applied for 3 different schools for transfers and they all told me they were full. And so I think that it creates a lot of effort on the part of parents and also a lot of frustration for them to not know who had space for their child in the first place. But I do get that it's complicated. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe Superintendent Boucher, do you have any thoughts on that as a superintendent that's going to be dealing with all of this?
I hate to admit that too bad kids don't normally have a sidebar, so I'm not sure exactly what that's.
My question was surrounding the letter that's going to go out to parents at D. I'm going to blame it on Mr. Morris because I know he probably induced you to bad behavior. So we've got the student that is attending a D or an F school, and they're getting a letter from their district telling them that they're eligible for a transfer, and it lists the A, B, and C schools. My question is, would it make sense to include information about not just whether or not the school is an A, a B, or a C, but whether or not that school has room in the first place for their child? Because I could see, you may have a district where there's only one, a handful of these schools and they're all full. And so would that be more complicated for you at the district level to have to do that? Or is it going to be more complicated for you to have to say no to parents who are applying for schools that there was no room for their child in the first place? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it depends on the size of the district, what you're looking for. In my district, it would be fine. I mean, we already have responsibility to the feds to do this anyway. If you had a D or an F school, you had to give parents the option of moving to an A or B or C school within your, within your school system. It wouldn't be a problem for me, but it could be a problem for some of the larger districts. Part of the problem too is the timing of all this. We're staffing right now, for example, but as I'm sure all of you people who are in schools right now, you know what your estimated enrollment would be in terms of the rollover. You have an idea if, for example, Ms. Ellis, you're a principal of a middle school, the feeder schools that are coming into your particular school, you may have an idea now of how many you're getting from each of those feeder schools. So this has to be done in the month of March. So you're making those estimates, and then you've got to also reserve room for families that are moving into your area over the summertime or any time really during the entire school year, and coming from non-public schools that might decide to go to your particular school. So there's a lot of this going into it. I honestly don't think this has been a major problem statewide. I mean, I haven't heard that this has been a real problem within the same district, and maybe this will reveal it if there are. or if they're having problems. But I don't know about mandating, you're in a DRF school and these particular schools could have room for you at your grade level. And you
Well,
will
I
have
think
to
there's a
learn.
timing issue.
And I hate to
SPS
ask Superintendent Brumley, but in Jefferson, for example, which is a much larger system than mine, with that,
You're referring specifically to the timeline in which we're asking them to, or that the legislation asked them to determine where the child's preference or the parent's preference might
because
be.
we'd be right in the middle of it right now as we speak.
Well, we actually moved it to this point in time because what we found in Jefferson was that we were offering choice the first 2 weeks of school, and by that point, parents were not going to exercise that because the kids were already engaged, they had friends, they had a teacher. And so I made the decision to ask our staff to transfer that to the month of March, so that going into the summer before uniforms are purchased, all that, and staffing decisions were essentially made, we would know those numbers. So you have a good point that it could even be earlier, maybe. But for us in Jefferson, it certainly was not working for families to have it once school began, but to push it in front of summer.
And if I'm not mistaken, the notification for the DNF Title I is done each at the beginning of the school year, and I'm not sure that.
This is saying that.
I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about the other DNF notification that goes out as Title I. I think that's usually sent out at the beginning of the year. As the post, and so you're having two deadlines, not saying that you should have one.
You have to mark, think a minute of what our cycle is. We don't get school performance scores. We do
That's what I
not
was
get
gonna
the
say.
letter grades until October or November.
Exactly, I was gonna say.
So you don't receive them until the fall, once the school year has started. So you're using it primarily for the following year anyway. So we would, in a normal cycle, not get, now we used to get them in the summertime, which made this whole process, not only for this particular process, but for working on interventions for kids and making plans for them and all. It was great that we had before the school year started. Now you don't get any results, or you don't get those detailed results until the fall. So we would get them in the fall, and then this would apply for in the following year, because in March then, you've got to do it based upon what your letter grades, your most recent letter grades were, which you're getting in the month of October, November, whenever we put them out.
That was
So I don't think March, is going to be that big of an issue. And I think most school systems are staffing now as we speak, or at least determining vacant, positions for the following year. So no, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I just don't know sure.
So maybe then the best thing to do is leaving it the way it is, but then letting districts know that they have the ability to put extra information that they want to, right? So there's nothing in this policy right now that would prohibit them if they decided to list capacity in an effort to steer parents to the schools that can do that. It's not a prohibition
I
on it.
have not, we have gotten some questions as far as a method of notification. I believe we had a school system ask, they said we sent out letters, we mailed letters last year before last to notify the DCNF, and it cost us $10,000 in mailing fees because of the letters that came back, the addresses that had changed. And so they wondered if we could send it out in our other ways. Well, as is similar to what you're asking, I'm not advising either way, but I'm sure that is up to the district if that's the way they choose to do it. I'm not sure the LD wouldn't advise either way.
Any other comment, Mr. Garber?
Yes, question for the superintendent. Did we get a list of the schools that have sent in their policy?
I'd be happy to give that to the members of the board. Absolutely. I have that now. Do you want to list now?
If you have it yet.
Yeah. I don't have a copy. I'll just read it to you.
Okay, thank you.
I was just provided this. Acadia, Caddo, Iberville, Point Rapides, St. Bernard. Good job. and Ascension.
Thank you.
So seven of the 69 districts have.
But I think that's also,
Yeah.
I think it's also a function of, it was covered at the Superintendent's Advisory Council last week.
Just last week,
And
right.
so it's beginning to even get more traction. So I mean, I assume we'll probably see these rolling in over the next few weeks.
Thanks, so I appreciate you bringing it to SAC.
Yes, I have requested that, yeah, capture y'all's attention to it, so yes, thanks. I'll be working on that guidance document and bring that back to you all in April, and we'll probably have some policy revisions to the code to go through the steps of the transfer appeals process more in depth as to, specifically once it's received in our office, but via US mail, how many days we have to respond, which is also in the other bulletin, but more administrative procedural
And
things.
if we do get any appeals, when we expect the first one?
June.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any public comment? We have a motion on the floor. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 35, item 5.6, consideration of an update report regarding the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council. The department recommendation is to receive the minutes of the meeting held February 23rd, 2022, and to approve the appointments of Janine Bourne, Chrisella Meteor, Edie Addison, and Rabbi Yossi Chesney to the membership of the ECCE Advisory Council as outlined.
I have a motion. Mr. Garvey, second. Dr. Davis. Any comments or questions from the board? I don't see any public comment. Motion, any objection? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 39, item 6.1, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to legislation of the Louisiana 2021 regular legislative session. The department recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 741, 746, 996, and 1566 regarding literacy.
May I have a motion? Mr. Morris, second. Ms. Ellis. Questions or comments from the board? Presentation.
Simply advising the board, these are policy revisions as a result of the work and the legislation that was passed during the last legislative session. So we're just making adjustments in policy based on action from last legislative session.
Mr. Morris.
Yeah, Superintendent Brumley, I'm really interested in item D, the progression plan relative to literacy. I wonder if you could get someone to speak to that.
Either Dr. Chesson or Mr. Bradford could probably speak to that.
I'm just, as you know, real interested in the literacy focus, literacy initiative, and just want to feel really comfortable that we're doing everything we can to make sure that our fourth graders are grade level literate, and we don't have any children slip through the cracks, right? So I know you guys are doing a lot of work with the literacy screener, putting a work process together. I saw the reference here to parental notification of students identified reading below grade level. So I was wondering if you could just kind of talk me through that process, as the student progresses from kindergarten to first grade, to second grade, to third grade. As a parent, I put my parent hat on, okay, maybe my grandparent hat. And I get some sense of expectations, right? What I could potentially be looking at, and how you're going to make me feel comfortable that as my child does get promoted from one grade to the next, that they are on one grade level.
Certainly, more so, what you're referring to is actually some proposed revisions to Bulletin 1566 of Pupil Progression Policies and Procedures Bulletin. And so, we know that this is the bulletin that the department uses to create the pupil progression template that school systems use to make their plans around the progression and retention of students from one grade level to the next. And so Act 438 requires parent reporting at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year so that parents can clearly see and understand how their children are performing in regards to literacy at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. Simply if they are reading above grade level, on grade level, or below grade level. If children are reading below grade level, it would also provide to parents documents, resources around what they can do at home and also what they can expect to see from school. So specifically what interventions would be done for those children reading below grade level during the school day, so what parents can expect during the school day, and then what are the things that they can utilize at home to help their children.
And are those specific interventions called out for in the policy here, or is that just LDOE program that you guys are rolling out? Where's that captured?
So that's captured in our guidance from the department. And so we'll have the pupil progression template updated for school systems to write their own pupil progression plans that are, locally approved by their boards. But we also will have a suite of guidance, resources, and documents all available in professional development at Teacher Leaders Summit and following to help school systems in implementing all of these literacy policies.
One last question. The parent notification, are they going to get a letter in the mail, or is there a formal process where the parent comes to the school? How do we ensure that engagement actually occurs?
So the legislation and the policy doesn't dictate exactly what that looks like. It just simply call it parent notification. I think more than likely a lot of times that is something sent home with the child, but school systems could choose how to make that parental notification.
Is there anything the department could do to ensure some quality control there?
We could release in our guidance different ways that schools can communicate with families. Sending home the report with the children is one option, but also mailing it or making some kind of personal contact is another option, especially for those children who are, below grade level in reading.
Sorry to press, I just think this is real important. Is there any way consideration could be given to parents signing off that they receive the notifications?
That could occur. It could occur in guidance, or it is something that we could possibly include in the policy itself. It's not there at this time.
Thank you.
Dr. Dix?
Just had a question on page 41 of our packet. It's chapter 23. I was curious under point 1, in the prior policy, students scoring above grade level will be considered for evaluation into a gifted program. Why was that changed from will to may?
So that, I believe, is in alignment with the verbiage of the legislation. And so we were trying to line up the policy with the verbiage in the legislation, and that's how it is captured there.
So prior to this, districts were required to test those kids for gifted if they scored above level, and now it's optional.
Yes.
I would say that I'll be interested to see, I think that one of the strengths of screening for gifted and talented in the state of Louisiana that substantially decreases differences across race and gender and ethnicity are requirements like that kids that are scoring above level they have to be screened for those programs. And so I would just, I'll be watching our gifted numbers by race and gender and ethnicity after we make this at the discretion of teachers and districts. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Dr. Chazon, right before you go, one question. My understanding is that there's a second part of this that's coming back next month. Can you speak to that for a little bit?
Yes, so what is not included in this literacy policy package is changes to the praxis assessment, those praxis requirements. So that is something that really requires us further exploration and research. I know y'all know those changes to praxis are really complicated. And so that's something that we are hopeful to bring to you all in April.
Could you elaborate? What types of changes?
So the change to practice that I'm referring to in regards to the literacy package would be an update to the reading component. So right now, there is discussion that the current praxis exam does not perhaps adequately assess the science of reading and those reading foundational skills. And so we are talking with ETS, we are talking with other stakeholders like our teacher preparation providers, not about adding an additional assessment, but how can we make some changes to the required praxis exam to utilize a reading assessment that is more in line with the science of reading and would better assess what we know our teacher preparation candidates need in order to be successful in the classroom.
An assessment that would be created by like ETS, or so they're willing to make some modifications?
We are in conversations with them right now about it. And so are other states. There's a lot of interest nationally in making these shifts to these assessments.
Thank you. We do have one public comment. Mr. Sheldon Jones wishes to speak. Thank you, Mr. Jones. If you can please identify yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheldon Jones. I'm chairperson of Business and Clinics Advisory Council. We did meet here in the Claiborne building on February 24th. Thank you, especially Mr. Morris for being present at that meeting. We did receive an agenda item that aligns to the one we were all in consideration to today in reference to revisions to basic policies to align with Act 38 in reference to K-3 early literacy training. I am definitely supportive of that initiative and compliance with the law. In Richland Parish, we are offering the science of reading training for grades 4 through 8. Our upper elementary and junior high teachers requested the training. They saw the value in it. Bessie did not allow us to have an opportunity to address this without giving all the consideration to it. We really do appreciate that. The council did not only receive but endorse the proposal that's before you today, and we ask that Bessie concur. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor. Any opposition? No opposition, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 51, item 6.2, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding learning pods. The department recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 126 and 741 regarding learning pods.
May I have a motion? Dr. Davis, second by Mr. Garvey. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mellering. Basically, Act 400 of the 2021 session put into law information around learning pods, helped codify that. Bessie asked the department to bring forward a policy around learning pods, and so that is essentially what you have before you today. And we do not particularly have a presentation around this, but you do have a policy in front of you, and we're certainly willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board? We do have one public comment. Mr. Gary Goffin, come out please.
Gary McGoff, and I represent the Original Charter Foundation. I'm sorry. comments. One is, oh, sorry. Two comments. One, with regard to the proposed pod rules that you have in the packet. They do not address the petition that was filed by the Middle Charter Academy on November 30th, which have an extensive list of recommendations and requests for charter school for pod rules. These are not addressed in the recommendations that are being made to you today. It would be important to note for what you're considering today that there is legislation pending in this session with bill that was introduced by Representative Emerson. It's House Bill 550, which specifically addresses pods, and the core of what is being proposed in this recommendation from DOE is that you have to go through a material amendment to be able to establish pods, and you have to go through a material amendment for change of address. The legislation that's pending right now does not require that. It really requires simply notification to the charter authorizer, whether it be a type 1 or a type 2, what that address would be. It's important to note that this is legislation, so if it would be approved by the legislature in this session, it would prevail over any rule that you would adopt. Senate Bill 67 has introduced a bill to totally update, or as he says, modernize the Administrative Procedures Act. And many of the problems that we have with that act right now in terms of definitions, timing, and process will be clarified in what they're passing this summer. So if you would pass this rule and finish the administrative process that you have to go through to adopt it, there may well be a new set of rules with regard to how you have to adopt these things. The important thing for you to know is, since this is the Administrative Procedures Act, procedural legislation and interpretive legislation is retroactive. So if they would pass that revamp of the Administrative Procedures Act, what you're doing now would have to comply with those requirements without you knowing what they are except for reading the bill. So my suggestion to you is to defer this until after the legislature finishes its work in June, so that you know what direction they may have given on this point. And you can save yourself a lot of time and trouble if they come out in a different place than what is proposed in the rule that you have before you today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, this is directed at the superintendent and perhaps Dr. Jason as well. Can you just, because this doesn't have the kind of detail that a formal presentation would have, would it be possible to just provide a voiceover so that we as a board are very clear on what the components of this policy we're actually proposing?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that we try to be quite broad in the creation of the policy, to not be restrictive in setting forth a policy on how schools or school systems could operate or operationalize a learning pod. I don't think that I've received any conversation or suggestions relative to any of that. I think that that's been fairly widely accepted as okay. I think that the point of question to Mr. McGoffin's point is that in the policy, we state that if a school if a charter decides to open a learning pod, then it would require a material amendment to come before the board. And our rationale behind that was simply that charters go through an evaluation process, both in the department with the third party. The third party makes a recommendation, then the department makes a recommendation to the board. The board considers the school and its operation and location at that time with that information. And so our only thought was, if a learning pod is going to change the operation that was originally approved by the board, that we felt as if this board probably wanted the authority to hear from that charter and weigh in on whether the board wanted to approve that pod through the vehicle of material amendment. So Mr. McGoffin is absolutely correct. There is a bill that was pre-filed by Representative Emerson that essentially, if it passes, my interpretation is that it would not require a material amendment for a charter to operate or to establish a learning pod. And so that's the question.
Mr. Carter?
I'll defer to Ms. Sandy.
Oh, okay, thank you. I think more specific information, because we spoke, actually, we discussed a rubric, we discussed different things in there. I don't see anything in here that specifies exactly what's going to happen when a material amendment will be submitted, and how you're going to determine if a learning pod is approved or not.
I think that was a conversation that you and Ashley had relative to how did the board evaluate rather they wanted to approve a material amendment for a learning pod. So that's not necessarily something that we have developed at this point. It would be a rubric for those evaluations. We just have the policy in front of you today.
Okay, but it still doesn't tell me for certain what this looks like when a materials amendment is submitted for learning pods, and then you have the law at hand. So I'm still kind of confused about the requirements.
So even though the law doesn't stipulate you as the authority, I think could make stricter standards. In other words, I don't think that it infringes upon the law to take it a step further and say we need to get formal notification and approve that, because you are actually amending the charter contract. And that would be what you are requesting, the material amendment. So you are making a change, it would be for the address change or grade levels. There are certain non-material and material amendments. This would be amending the contract of the charter, and if you chose to make this a material amendment, I don't see any reason why it would interfere with what the law states as far as.
Okay. Well, the question also would be, can they have learning pods at this point of entering into an agreement for a type 2 charter? And then the other question is.
I think they could if they had it in their.
Yeah, and the other question is, how do they determine if that learning pod is appropriate or not? Coming from the department, is there with a third party? Also, how often are the material amendments submitted? And from what I understand, amendments are turned in once a year. Is that correct, or twice?
I think there's certain automatic.
And I'd like, if you don't mind,
Yes.
I'd like the department to answer.
Yeah, we had about almost 2 years ago now, had tried to put that on a cycle for a couple of times a year. I've heard from a number of you that might feel like you would like to see the opportunity for material amendments to come as they come through. So we're more than willing to look at that and bring those forward at a more frequent basis.
So can we have more details before we consider this today to make certain that these things are in order? I'm just questioning, because it's something new, and we have a law, then we have another bill coming forward. So that's the question I have. We have law, we have guidelines now, and then we have another bill coming. And what does that bill look like? So,
I mean, I think that's a decision, that the board will have to make. I mean, we were asked to bring forward policy.
Correct.
We're simply trying to adhere to that.
Yeah.
And whenever we did that, we didn't know that for sure a bill was coming, and a bill has since been filed. And so we wanted to adhere to what was asked of us to bring forward a policy. And so that's
I think, thank you, Dr. Brumley, you're correct. But I think it's the understanding, what does this look like? Turning in a material amendment, does it tell us what a learning pod should look like? Or what are your requirements? Is it open, wide open? Are there specifics? I'm just questioning that. If that is something that, I don't know if anybody can.
Mr. Chairman? If there's no other discussion on that, could I use the balance of my time to address the conversation that just took place?
I think Mr. Garvey has a question first. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask the superintendent and staff, you stated that you do not have the rubric design and all the details worked out, but could you give us a brief discussion I'm sorry, Michael wasn't here. A brief discussion on what you're thinking to put in the rubric, even though you haven't finalized it, and that may help flesh this out enough?
Well, I think that this is, no, I know, this is new. This is new for everyone. So, you know, if a policy is approved that indicates that a material amendment is required, then what we would do at that point is try to gather together a work group of individuals to build what that rubric might look like. So, I mean, I don't know that we can answer at this point, you know, what would a rubric look like, because we were only asked to do that last week, so we haven't really fleshed that out.
Well, with that in mind, should we amend this to ask you to develop a rubric to bring to us?
Mr. Darby, I would say that's certainly the will of the board here. We were just trying to adhere to the request to bring forward a policy on learning pods by this date. So that's what we've done, and certainly we're happy to do that. But I would say that we would need to convene individuals beyond just the department. I mean, we would want to work with some of our partners with our public charter, certainly to give this some consideration.
If we defer on this and ask you to start working on the rubric and stuff like that, is that going to delay this to the point where it affects what schools might do on this issue next year? Or would that be the case anyway, regardless of what we do today?
It's hard for me to know that, Mr. Darby. I mean, we certainly, if we are asked to work to develop a rubric, we're going to do that. We're going to do that anyway. That was our intent to do that if this policy were passed. So we will work as urgently as possible to develop a rubric on that and bring it back to the board.
Well, let me rephrase it another way. Is there any benefit to us passing this today if we really have to wait till you develop a rubric to know what we're doing?
Our opinion is that you don't need the rubric to pass a policy that requires a material amendment, that we could develop the material amendment after the policy is passed. I mean, develop the rubric after the material amendment is passed. Policy.
One more question. What about charter schools that have these pods now? Would they be grandfathered in for this coming year? Or is it possible that your rubric would tell them, no, they have to tell those children that have been in pods for this year that they cannot be in a pod next year?
I'm not familiar with the degree in which pods exist or don't exist from either public charters or traditional schools at this point. So I would believe that if it was a charter authorized by this particular board to do a particular thing in a particular location, and that you passed a policy indicating that a material amendment was needed in order to change that you would want us to bring that back before you for your consideration.
So before they could not be grandfathered, before an existing pod with existing children could be canceled, the issue would have to come back to us for a decision to cancel it?
I would think that is what you would want of us as the authorizer. I mean, I would think that as the authorizer, you would want to know that a change had occurred. But clearly, if you pass a policy that doesn't require a material amendment, then that wouldn't be the case. This is just a proposed policy we put in front of you based on the request to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess to me, and the exchange that you two just had, Mr. Gregory and Superintendent Brumley, bring to light to me the concerns about learning pods right now. We don't know where they are. We don't know which schools have them and which don't. We don't know that they're offering special education services to their students with IEPs. We do not know what is happening right now. It is a black box. And so for me, this policy is a first step towards bringing to light where they are they complying with existing rules that govern them regarding their teachers being employees of the school district? Are they providing all the services to the students in the pod that are available at the actual physical location of the school? And so for me, when I read this, I mean, it's easy for me to think about the charter application when it first comes in, that there's a rubric of all the policies that they have to be spelled out. Do you have this, right? Is it consistent with state law? And so what this is the beginning of that if we pass this then allows the department to go back and build the rubric by which the department gets to look and see, are they telling us their method of instruction, right? Are they complying with the rules about what constitutes complete online learning versus blended, right? Because that has a big impact on the amount of MFP that they get. And so, I'm uncomfortable with the thought that pods are existing right now or may be existing in schools that we're in charge of, and we do not know where they are.
Yeah, I'd like to note this, that we're referring here to public and charter, and not only charter, so we're balanced here. But I'd like to make a motion to defer this, recommend consideration of revisions to bulletin regarding the learning pods until we receive more information in regards to the next steps.
Motion, substitute motion, Holloway.
Second.
Ms. Carroll, Orange, Jones, seconds. Goffin, you had about 2 minutes left?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, wait.
Defer
until we need to define it.
Probably June, would that interfere? I don't think that's superintendent will. It'll give you enough time so we can talk.
Yeah, whatever's best for the board.
I don't want to rush you. I don't want to,
We expect to get something back from the legislature. They could say it's all a lot of time and trouble, but if we just coordinate the two.
The legislature will close at the beginning of June.
Could we set the time to coordinate the two?
Sure, absolutely. What are your thoughts, Mr. Morris?
I think our meeting in June is after
Right
the
after.
legislature adjourns, so I think by then we'll know if it's going to be at the governor's desk or that. We won't know if he's going to sign it necessarily. It's possible.
Okay.
So we have just about 2 minutes left. I'll try to give those 2 minutes to respond.
With regard to the substitute motion to defer, I would encourage that and support it until after the legislature acts. Several things that I was going to talk about are going to be addressed in the Administrative Procedures Act, and the confusion here about what it entails is specifically addressed, and if you don't wait to do it right, then you're going to be subject to challenge. So I would suggest that the deferral, at least until your June meeting, if not your July meeting, would be appropriate.
Thank you. Did you have other?
Not on this motion.
We now have a substitute motion. Is there any objection to the substitute motion?
Did you say June or July? I didn't catch it.
June.
Okay, and that's going to be after the legislature makes whatever decision that they're going to make?
It should be.
The question there would be, is the government going to veto it?
Yeah.
So you have to look at the effective date, which is typically August the 1st.
And it is, Mr. Morris, it is possible to make its way through the legislative process quicker. It could already be on the governor's desk, which changes the period. There is an objection, so we need a roll call vote.
Motion to defer.
And just so we're clear, this is on Ms. Holloway's motion to defer. A yes vote is in favor of deferment, and no vote is against deferment.
Dr. Bofi?
Yes.
Dr. Bofi votes yes. Mr. Castile?
Yes.
Mr. Castile votes yes. Dr. Davis? No. Votes no. Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Votes yes. Ms. Holloway?
Yes.
Votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Votes yes. Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Votes yes. Ms. Bochet?
Yes.
Votes yes. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Votes yes. And Mr. Miller, would you like to vote?
Yes, and I vote yes.
Vote yes. All right, the motion passes.
Next item.
The next item is on page 54, item 6.3, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1964, Louisiana Content Standards, Benchmarks, and Grade Level Expectations for Social Studies regarding the adoption of updated social studies content standards. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent the repeal and reestablishment of Bulletin 1964. Revised backup and a PowerPoint deck has been distributed.
Can I get a motion? Mr. Morris, second by Mr. Jones. Superintendent Romley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Miller. Everyone knows that this is a really important body of work for our state and our children. We know that we set out to accomplish a feat that oftentimes seemed impossible, but I think we all can agree it always felt worth. And so at this point, I would just ask Dr. Chasson to come forward and make a presentation on this process and where we stand.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to present to you all today an update on our social studies standards revision process. I'll start by reviewing some of the goals Bessie laid out for revising the Louisiana Student Standards for Social Studies back in December of 2020. Bessie outlined a desire to shift the standards towards an approach that balances the acquisition of disciplinary skills along with content knowledge, to create a more coherent sequence of content, especially to strengthen knowledge and skills at the elementary level to make sure that students are prepared for secondary and post-secondary work, and also to better integrate the historical perspectives of people from all backgrounds. Additionally, throughout this process, the department was led by two guiding principles: diversity of perspective and public input. Just an overview of our journey to new social studies standards. Bessie voted back in December of 2020 to review the Louisiana Student Standards for Social Studies. From March through September, the steering committee and teacher work groups met and revised standards. In September, there was a third steering committee meeting, and the committee voted 19-1 to endorse the revised standards. In October, the board directed the department to extend the public comment period to the end of November and to utilize and consider public feedback submitted through the online portal. That public comment period was open through the months of October and November via an online form. And at the December Bessie meeting, a public comment summary was presented to this board. Bessie then passed a motion instructing the department to review public comment and present a refined set of standards to Bessie during this March board meeting. From February 8th through February 22nd, we reopened the public comment portal with the revised standards, and stakeholders were able to provide feedback on these revised social studies standards. I'll next walk you through some key areas of concern that were identified based on public comment and the refinements to the standards that were made in response to those comments. Based on our analysis of public comments, along with some additional considerations from our executive team, we have three areas of concern that were identified. The first of which was overly broad standards. In response to these concerns, the standards were expanded and made more specific. The second concern was around grade 3. The concerns were that third grade did not devote enough time on state and national history, and it contained world history content that was seen as potentially too difficult. In response to these concerns, the grade 2 course content, United States history, extended into grade 3 in the current version. The third concern was around high school U.S. history, and that the draft at that point missed the American Revolution, the nation's founding and high school U.S. history, and some fundamental primary source documents. In response to these concerns around the content in high school U.S. history, the course was expanded with more concrete references to founding documents and critical primary sources from 1776 to 2008. I'd like to show you next a few examples of these changes. We received 454 comments supporting more specificity or the inclusion of specific examples in the standard. Many of those comments expressed concerns that broad standards would leave the door open to concepts and topics that stakeholders and educators expressed disagreement with. In response to this feedback, many of the broad standards have been made more precise to provide maximum clarity and transparency for administrators, teachers, and other community stakeholders. Here's an example from the foundational draft that listed the major events topics to be covered in grade 7. And then the revised standard that you can see is far more specific about what students are expected to know and be able to do. By increasing the specificity in this current draft of the standards, teachers, administrators, and public stakeholders won't have to wait for additional documents to provide specific guidance around the new standards because the specificity is included in the standards themselves. Now we'll look at an example of how the second grade course content was extended into third grade. Many of the comments on third grade expressed disagreement with the course content and a frustration with the loss of the interdisciplinary connections and opportunities between literacy and social studies in third grade. We were able to take the content intended for second grade and divided it up over second and third grade. This change maintains those interdisciplinary connections between social studies and literacy while still raising our expectations for the knowledge and skills acquired in elementary school. I'll next recapture the goals set by Bessie for updating these standards and how this revised draft addresses each of them. So goal 1 was around shifting the standard towards an approach that balances the acquisition of disciplinary skills along with the content knowledge. While the 2011 standard set some expectations for disciplinary skills, like reading and interpreting primary sources, creating and using maps, and expressing understanding through writing, these standards did not necessarily build vertically, and they created uneven expectations for students. The refined draft has clearer, vertically aligned expectations for the acquisition of these disciplinary skills. Additionally, this draft sets up very clear expectations for what content is to be covered in each grade. Here's an example from 4th grade that demonstrates the specificity that is included in these revised standards. Goal 2 was to create a more coherent sequence of content to strengthen knowledge and skills at the elementary level to ensure students are prepared for secondary and post-secondary work. As you can see on this chart, this is the refined standard sequence, and you can see that it now starts with kindergarten, which is life in my home, school, and community, and expands a child's view from one year to the next in a really coherent content sequence where they are taken through life in their home, school, the community they live in, to the state of Louisiana, then to the United States of America. They then explore world history and return for a deeper dive into both the United States and Louisiana. And in high school, the standards are included for civics as well as U.S. history from 1776 to 2008. Goal 3 was to better integrate the historical perspectives of people from all different backgrounds. And you can see 2 examples of the refined standards that do just that. I know it is top of mind for a lot of folks right now is what happens next. It is the board, the department's recommendation that the board approve these refined standards. And so I know everyone in the field is wondering what happens next pending this approval. And so this is an implementation timeline. We are very aware of the fact that new standards requires new resources, new assessments, professional development for our educators. And so 2022-2023 would be a learning year for our educators. This would kick off at our 2022 Teacher Leader Summit, where we would first begin providing resources and educator professional development to the field around these new standards. Next spring would be the final administration of the LEAP 2025 Social Studies Assessment for 3rd through 8th grade. And then 2023-2024, the new standards would be implemented in our school systems. That would bring about the new social studies assessment field testing during that 23-24 school year. And the operational assessments would be administered in 2024-2025. So once again, we realize how crucial that learning year will be for educators and school systems in regards to these revised standards. During this time, we plan to provide resources such as a 2011-2021 standards crosswalk, a transitional plan that takes into consideration student cohorts, recognizing that we need to take a look at every cohort that students are in and how they're matriculating through this new content sequence from where they have what they have learned in the past. And so we'll have transitional plans for each cohort of students. We'll also have scope and sequence documents to support the updated content sequence and social studies instructional strategy one-pagers for educators to use. We'll provide professional development at the Teacher Leader Summit and through a host of webinars. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? I know we have a number of public comments. Before we get to that, thank you for this slide right here. I know you and I have personally talked about this, the importance of a transitional plan. So thank you for your efforts and the department and your staff on that. Also, Dr. Rowley and I have talked about this. I'm happy to see that there's going to be webinars for training our educators. I know this is a large change in some areas, and so I'm happy to see that we're using the technology we've discovered through this pandemic. You have things such as Zoom, other things like that at our disposal. It does make it a little bit easier, especially without forcing teachers to drive sometimes long distances in order to get that training. To continue to use those types of resources that we now know what to use. I appreciate it. So thank you. We're going to move on to public comments if there are no questions. I'm going to go through first 4 individuals that have submitted cards that do not wish to speak. Kathy Edmondson, Representative Edmondson, supports but does not wish to speak. Mary Susie Mabry is not speaking but does support it. Katie Alexander does not wish to speak but does support it. And Gary Irwin does not wish to speak but does support it. I'm going to read off 4 of them. If you don't mind, you can make your way down and sit at the table or sit in the room right behind so we can speed this up a little bit. Mr. Sheldon Jones, Ms. Joan Garner, Dr. Keith Corville, and Ms. Debbie Cope. If y'all can make your way down. I was just informed that Dr. Keith Corville does support, but had some lead Mr. Woody Jenkins, if you can also come down.
I'm representing him today. Is that
Okay.
That's okay.
Uh,
I'm just reading his statement.
Wait, she's put her name.
I'm gonna need a card from you, if you don't mind. Even, I know you're speaking on behalf of.
You do have my card.
Okay.
Chrissy Pike.
Okay.
That works.
Ms. Garner, you can start.
Yes, sir.
Please identify yourself for us.
Yes.
And if you're with an organization, please let us know that.
Yes, my name is Joan Garner. I am not with an organization. I'm here representing myself, Brumley, I believe, and he referred this to the committee that was working on it. I'm still very unclear on what the status is regarding a lot of the public comments that I submitted as far as facts are concerned. I'm not dealing in theory. I'm dealing in facts. Facts that involve sacrifices that my father made, that I continue to make, and I still don't have clarity on how it's being incorporated. That is actually part of the Louisiana Civil Rights Trail and U.S. Civil Rights Trail, which has recently come up, which is how I've contacted you, reached out to you guys, in which that's under tourism. I certainly believe that if it's good enough for tourism and tourists to come to the state, that these facts should be relevant for our students. They should not be optional. One of the questions I had was this going to be incorporated in this curriculum? And at some point, I think I was told that it was a resource that would be optional. I don't think that it should be optional. If we're using it for tourism, our students should know. And so I think we've oftentimes got it all caught up in theory and pro and for theory or pro and for inclusive language, and we forget the basic facts. Facts such as the fact that De Beer, which happened, which was from Point Parish, actually was a precursor to Plessy, which is included in Capitol Park Museum, but was not included in your curriculum initially. And so I'd like to know or get a better understanding of how these facts are going to be fleshed out, because at this point it's still very vague. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Debbie Cope.
Good afternoon. Debbie Cope, retired executive assistant, Terrebonne Parish School District, and now a congressional liaison for Christians United for Israel. Chairman Mallory, committee members of the Bessie Board, and State Superintendent Brumley, thank you for this opportunity to public comment on proposed student standards for social studies. There are so many important areas here to discuss, but for the sake of time, I will have to stick to my notes. Although I am retired from my position at Terrebonne Parish School District, I am not retired from my passion for education. I know firsthand the importance of strong and effective leadership at all levels of the education system. As the right hand to Superintendent Philip Martin, our district's most phenomenal commander-in-chief for 13 and a half years, and we all know he's retiring at the end of June. I have witnessed the difference this one leader has made in thousands of students, while also making a life-changing impact on just one child at a time. He bridged gaps with his team and initiated unity for the sake of the greater priority, the student. We have among us many of you that have also taken on this same effective approach. And I stand before you today to applaud your efforts, all of you, in taking on the standards with a clear and precise vision for Louisiana's students. When Bessie appointed Superintendent Brumley in 2020, I will quote a phrase he used. He said, "I'm not Superman, but I will work super hard." He, along with the collaboration of Bessie, has accomplished just that with these standards. Countless hours have been poured into listening to public comments, which, in and of itself, is substantial for the building blocks of education. We have all heard the old cliche, it takes a village to raise one child. While this analogy may be accurate, it also takes a superhuman to be able to hold the vastness of that village together when there are so many facets and moving parts to juggle for the greater priority, the student. For without the student, none of us would be able to do what we do. I am here not only to support the work of Dr. Brumley and Bessie in the robust new inclusions of the proposed standards, but to honor each of you in accordance with a verse taken from the book of Romans 12, 9, and 10, which says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other.
Ms. Coe, your time's up, please.
I only had one other paragraph.
If you can, yes, ma'am, just hurry up, please.
I came today especially in support of Section US 21 of the standards that outlines the consequences of World War II and communicates the breadth of history of anti-Semitism and the resilient sacrifices of American service members in liberating the concentration camps. In closing, by educating future generations of the atrocities that took place, I pray that the phrase, never again, isn't just a sobering quote, but becomes a solemn reality. Again, thank you for your time. God bless each of you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Sheldon Jones, Chairperson of Business Superintendent's Advisory Council. At our meeting on February 24th, we received the same presentation that Bessie received today. We are thankful of the arduous work that the Department of Education has put in over the past 2 years as it pertains to the social studies review process. All council members present unanimously voted to endorse these standards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Height, I know you indicated you're going to read Mr. Jenkins. Representative Owen, you can walk down. Ms. Kenny, Benoit, you can head down as well. And Patricia Benoit, you can head down. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christy Pike, and I am representing Woody Jenkins today, and not myself, but I do agree with what I'm about to read as his statement wholeheartedly. The proposed standards are well balanced and do a great job of telling the story of our country in its totality. American exceptionalism is emphasized in standards that reflect our ingenuity, resilience, and a never-ending quest for freedom and equality under law in pursuit of a more perfect union. They provide a foundational framework of factual events, people, places, and primary documents. In contrast to current standards, they offer more colorful and interesting detail, which will be beneficial for teachers, especially those relatively new to the profession. It is imperative that our young people understand and appreciate the unique principles and values on which our great country was founded, and how it has been a beacon of hope and freedom for the world, while also working through injustices and inequalities. These standards reflect those concepts and those struggles. According to the Louisiana Department of Education, almost 2,000 comments have been received in the public comment portal. Without question, these comments have helped improve this document and better reflect the values of the people of our state. We must offer much gratitude to Dr. Brumley and his staff and the Bessie Board for being open and responsive to the feedback of Louisiana parents, teachers, and community members. These standards will provide guidance for future generations. Everyone involved in this process, the work groups, steering committee, those who offered comments, the LDOE staff, and you and Bessie should take great pride in approving these standards. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Representative Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. I came really to say thank you to you all. This has been an arduous process, and I know y'all have empowered different sets of people to go through this, first the committee and then the public. I want to genuinely say thank you for that. I know there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of effort behind this, and I am genuinely grateful as a fellow elected official for what y'all have done. From the beginning, I have paid very careful attention to this for a lot of reasons. My colleague Royce Duplessis in our first session came to the Education Committee and asked us to take a look at the African American experience in the schools. And I was very puzzled at the time. I said, well, shouldn't it be there by now? Shouldn't things be better? And I told Royce I would pay attention, and I have. Not just for that, but for all of it. And I have read each set of standards, draft standards that have come out, literally down to the semicolon and to the phrase. And I am thankful for your hard work. I will tell you, my perception is that they are balanced. I am very, very thankful for what I've seen. When I read a document and I look down and I see the Tuskegee experiment and the Tuskegee Airmen, I see balance. When I see Patrick Henry and Emmett Till, I see balance. When I see the Trail of Tears, when I see Navajo code talkers, I see balance. When I see black codes and I see 1965 civil rights legislation, on the other end of it, I see balance. When I see the Middle Passage and the Oregon Trail, I see balance. When I see the Holocaust, the Russian Holodomor, the rape of Nanjing, and all these things in there that are so important for students to know in the context of the world they live in, the way our government is formed, I'm just grateful for the work that has gone into this. I'm hopeful for the future of our state, and thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Representative. Next, Ms. Cami Benoit.
My name is Cami Benoit. I received my bachelor in elementary education from McNeese State University in 2014, my master's of educational leadership from Louisiana State University in Shreveport in 2020. I'm certified grades pre-K through 5th grade, and I currently teach in Cameron Parish. I am here today in support of the 2022 Louisiana Social Studies Standards. If you turn on any news channel today or in the past few weeks, it is evident why these standards, scoped the way they are so imperative to the education of our students, the future of our state, and our great nation. Our freedoms and our principles were bought at a pricey cost and must be understood and protected, lest they be so easily lost due to lack of knowledge. These standards are scoped in a way that teaches students from kindergarten to 12th grade the basic fundamentals of fairness, respect, responsibility, protection of our liberties, smart economical decision-making, hard work, the rich history and traditions of our great state, and so much more. Each grade level has standards that incorporate differentiation of events and sources through cause and effect and compare and contrast analysis that remain developmentally and age-appropriate. One thing that really stood out to me when reviewing the standards was history is taught as a whole and factual, our accomplishments and our imperfections. Different ideologies, principles, and religions are not taught in an indoctrinating or promotive manner, but rather in a comparative cause and effect method where students are to analyze how certain beliefs, ideologies, and religions shaped world events, including the founding principles of freedom, which are so precious to our country. There is no division or bias in these standards. Instead, the underlying theme of these standards is unity of Americans through great sacrifice to have the freedom of thought and difference of opinions. It is our duty as educators and citizens of the United States of America to teach all generations that freedom is not free, how we have come to have the world and country that we are living in now, and the process and responsibility that we all have in making greater change and protecting our rights and liberties. And I believe these standards do just that. They make me proud to be an educator in Louisiana, and I believe that they set a standard for the rest of the states to follow. I would like to thank our state superintendent, Dr. Bromley, and all the educators that work so hard on this framework. This is exactly what our students deserve. And I humbly ask the board to approve the 2022 Louisiana Social Studies Standards.
Thank you. We have 3 individuals left. Ms. Patricia Benoit, Ms. Tori Hummel, and Deanne Haas.
Ms. Benoit waves.
Ms. Hummel, Ms. Haas.
American history, and my students love history, American history. We enjoy all types of activities that are in the current curriculum, and I think they're grade specific and grade appropriate. I'd like to advocate to maintain the current standards because students 9 through 11
learn American history carefully and appropriately that way. I believe in consistency and continuity of American history teaching. I heard the word vertical alignment, and I firmly believe in that. I believe it's an injustice to our 4th and 5th graders not to have that American history. Right now, the proposed standards have world history. And I've got the 4th grade, I've got ancient world here, and I've got medieval to the early modern world in grade 5. I would really like to keep American history personally. America was built on inalienable rights, individualism, limited government, separation of powers, free market economics, checks and balances. Ben Franklin even said, ignorance produces bondage. A nation of well-informed men who have been taught to know and prize the rights that God has given them cannot be enslaved. It is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins. And I ask my students every year at the beginning of the year what they remember from 4th grade, and they're smart and they're great students. It's just, they need a continuity. They can maybe tell me one of the 10 rights in the Bill of Rights. And we talk about it a little bit, but that's mostly a 4th grade standard. I also wanted to say that America is the one place you can come to with the dream of owning your own piece of land. You work hard and you cultivate the land, you can pass something that's yours. You can build a better life. It was the American dream that says hard work matters. It's not just given to you. You're not entitled to it. Opportunity is here. You can be inspired to hope, believe, take a risk, create, innovate, and see your dreams come true. I believe that as a country, we've forgotten where we came from. I heard a lot of other people talk about sacrifice, and that's wonderful, but the students needed a consistency and not to have a 2-year gap before they have American history again in 6th grade or middle school and high school. They need a strong foundation in elementary school, not just 2nd and 3rd grade or primarily in 3rd grade. 4th grade currently has the American Revolution. I even think 4th grade is cramming a lot into 4th grade. 3rd, 4th, 5th, all 3 of those grades deserve to have those wonderful principles in American history. So I realize my time's up, so I just want to encourage you, if you could, to keep American history in 4th and 5th grade. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Eno, if you're here now. Thanks. Those are all the public comments we have. Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Miller.
I just wanted to add to what we heard, the comments I heard about the superhuman efforts from Superintendent Brumley. This team, tremendous challenge here to bring everyone together, to get a consensus here for these social studies standards that we're teaching our children. How important it is that they get these values in the classroom, in the public school classroom. So just really appreciate Superintendent Brumley, the time and the effort, the planning, the consideration, and the organization to bring this to the board. So I just want to thank you for that. And also I wanted to specifically thank the 2 teachers that testified today. Really sincerely appreciate your time and effort to travel here, and appreciate your heartfelt thoughts and sharing those with the board. Thank you.
And I won't be redundant. I just want to echo the comments that are made, and I appreciate everyone here at the department as well as all the groups that got involved in this, and we can come to consensus on these standards. But I'd also like to say, once we approve these, this is where the hard work really begins, because every teacher in this state now who teaches social studies will have to revise and redo their entire curriculum. And we currently don't have any Tier 1 curriculum materials or textbooks in social studies. I know that, Dr. Brumley has said there's been some discussions with some of the publishing companies. However, everyone, even in my district, and all teachers are getting very antsy now, because come August, really, they're looking at trying, well, maybe not August, trying to implement this, but we're changing everything and when things are taught. So could the department, maybe at the next meeting, give us some timelines as to when maybe we can expect the scope and sequence for each of these, when the scope and sequence will come out, so that we can begin getting our district curriculum writers together to begin to develop materials that will address these new standards at each different grade level.
Certainly in terms of sequence, happy to work through that. I think in terms of scope, one of the things that I believe we've already accomplished is with the specificity of the standards, a lot of that is accomplished, but sequencing is certainly important. What we will do, if it's appropriate, Mr. Mellery, at the next meeting is we'll come back with a more detailed implementation timeline with a little more substance to that beyond today's meeting.
Sure. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to be in a luncheon with some senators and representatives from Central Louisiana. And I was really happy when they said, Tommy, we said they hope that Betsy tomorrow Wednesday will approve the standards so we can move forward. I'm ready to go.
I'd just like to say, I was talking about a timeline, if it's possible to also get information about when textbooks might be available, because I know that I went and asked teachers in the district to show me their social studies materials for the 4th grade and the 5th grade, and I came home with just binders of things that teachers were putting together because we had no textbooks, and so teachers have begged me, please give me a social studies textbook.
They have been waiting over a decade.
Yes.
And so we are optimistic that we will have publishers that choose to write to these standards.
Any other comments? Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, motion passes. Next agenda.
This concludes your agenda.
Meeting is adjourned.